Cool. So thank you all for joining. It's Neurodiversity Celebration Week. So I'm sure everybody has been looking at the great stuff and great content that's out there. I've certainly been following LinkedIn, and there's some amazing stuff happening across the week. And I imagine you've all joined today because you all recognise the amazing talents and benefits neurodivergent people can bring to the workplace. So today we are it's an hour's webinar. We'll probably talk for 30 to 40 minutes, and there'll be time for questions. And what we're going to touch on today is the amazing talent that neurodivergent people can bring to businesses, but why we think there's still a huge disparity between businesses knowing that that talent is out there, but there's still a huge unemployment rate for all neurodivergent people, and also a massive amount of unfulfilled employment vacancies here in the UK. So you might have all heard the phrase, the Great Resignation. So we know businesses are really struggling to recruit, and we are going to touch on today why we think that is, and give you some kind of key pointers to hopefully take away to your businesses and start that conversation and start to fulfill roles that you have in your business by looking at neurodivergent talent. So I'm Emma. I work for 𝐁𝐴bled for Rangam, and the part that I work for is 𝐁𝐴bled UK. So I am a solutions manager, and what that means is I work with businesses and employers to find solutions to bringing neurodivergent talent in, whether that is through looking at recruitment programs, training, consultancy, supporting their employee resource group, essentially tailoring anything we do to match that business requirements. I will pass you over to Lee to give a quick introduction of himself and give you a quick overview of what we do as a whole here at Rangam.
Yep. Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everybody. As Emma said, my name is Lee Corless. I'm the Senior Vice President, Sales and Partnering in EMEA under the 𝐁𝐴bled banner, but I'm also part of the Rangam Global Leadership Team. A little bit about Rangam itself. So Rangam is a minority woman and disability owned organization. We are a workforce solutions company. We obviously, as Workforce Solutions, we cover hiring for what you would call neurotypical hiring, your day-to-day hiring needs. But we also have our 𝐁𝐴bled program. Now, our 𝐁𝐴bled program is where we look to support businesses and individuals find work or find skilled workforce for autistic, neurodivergent, and disabled candidates. When we work with employers, we help you build a program that is sustainable for yourselves. We do that on a consultative basis, so we want to work with you to understand what you're trying to achieve, and we help you achieve that. We can do that through training. We have our concierge teams that can support you after the hirings have happened, so your managers, your work colleagues. We support the individual right the way through the process as well. We don't just take people onto our books to find them a job and just keep pushing resumes forward. We actually reach out to every individual, have great discussions with them, understand what their talents are, what they really enjoy to do in their spare time, because it's all relevant. If we can find people a role that they're passionate about, they will give them more. So today we're going to talk through a lot of how we help companies, how companies can help themselves, and a lot more about the talent that's out there. So I hope today you do find and go away with at least one new interesting thing to research. And equally, if you want to continue the conversation, then do reach out to us. There is the contact us at the bottom of the page. So do contact us, fill out the form. We're happy to get in touch and talk a little bit more about what we do.
Thanks, Lee. So before we get going, the first thing we're going to do is a quick poll. So I'm just going to open. So it's a quick question, and it's a way for you all to vote. A bit nice, a bit of interactivity here. So the first question I'm going to post in the poll, and you should see it come up, is approximately what percentage of neurodivergent people do you think are unemployed currently? Oh, great answers. I feel like I'm on some sort of, you know, on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when you ask the audience and you can see it moving. So I can see all the votes coming in. I think most people have voted. Give you a couple more seconds to place your vote or change your vote if that's what you want to do. Great. So I will go through each. We've got 3 of these questions. So I'll go through each of the 3 and then we'll go onto the slide and I'll talk through what the answers are and some of the reasoning for why we think those answers are what they are. So I'm just going to post the next one. So this next one, so approximately how many vacancies do you think there currently are in the UK? I probably gave it away before a little bit when I did my introduction. So the options here are 750,000, 1,318,000 or 900,000. Oh, good split here across all options. I mean, all of them are pretty high. So great. And I'm going to now post the last one. This might be a bit of a red herring question for you all. So what industries do neurodivergent people typically succeed in? So creative, health, STEM. You might all be getting a bit frustrated because you might want to click on all 3 options. And we'll come to that when we go through the next slide. Great. So I'm going to now go to the next slide and talk through a little bit of those answers. So the next slide, if people can see that, is so quick fire quiz. So it is actually 78%. That needed to be updated, but 78% approximately neurodivergent people are currently unemployed in the UK. That figure comes from ONS data, and that is all shared in your handouts, which I will post on here towards the end, so you'll be able to have access to where that data comes from. The 78% is really based on the unemployment rate for autistic people in the workplace. However, we know autism is part of neurodivergence, so the highest one will always be the main stat. The second one, so it's a huge amount of vacancies, unfulfilled vacancies at the moment. So 1,318,000. This is also from ONS data, and it was correct in the October of 2021. We know through COVID, lots of people have left their jobs and lots of people are struggling to find jobs. So there's such a huge disparity there between unfulfilled vacancies and the number of people that are unemployed. So why are businesses not able to get that talent into those unfulfilled vacancies? And finally, as you probably all knew, and we're trying to answer through those polls, it is anything. So there's a lot of talk that, neurodivergent people, especially autistic people, may succeed more maybe in engineering or STEM-based roles. But as we come to the next slide where we talk through skills profile a bit more, neurodivergent people can succeed in any role where their interests lie and their skill sets are. So it's not necessarily about saying we need to hire into these specific roles in our businesses. It's about thinking, how do we create all of our roles and opportunities to be as accessible as they can be to our applicants, because that's where you're missing out in talent. It doesn't necessarily matter that you haven't got the specific role that fits what we think neurodivergent people can do. It's more the processes for getting and retaining that talent and making sure that talent can thrive and succeed in your business.
And it looks like Emma just managed to eliminate herself from the room. She'll be back in a moment. There we go. She's back.
First time we've used this platform, so I clicked the wrong button, so I apologise. I'm going to now click through to the next slide, to our skills profile. So as you probably all know, neurodivergent, there's so many neurodivergent conditions out there. The key ones we talk about quite a lot are ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, and dyscalculia. Everybody, it's really key to understand that everybody is individual. So not everybody will have the same skills profile. And what you probably often hear is people will have a spiky profile. So will be really amazing at some elements. So for example, with ADHD, someone might be really incredible at networking and talking and being creative, but actually be really poor and at organizational skills, timekeeping, time management. For me, so I don't have a diagnosis, but I definitely see myself as being a kind of an ADHD profile. And one of the things that, it's a real struggle within work is wanting to do all these creative ideas that Lee will probably recognize that I'll be really excited about all my ideas, but the things that I probably need in the background is somebody to make sure I'm managing my time effectively, because sometimes the ideas that I have, I'm not necessarily recognizing the amount of time that will take to do. So I'll often over prioritize, I'll over schedule myself and not necessarily be able to complete all of the things that I've said I will be able to do. So I'm just going to pass you over to Lee now, who will be able to talk a little bit more. So from Lee's background, as people might know, Lee worked within JP Morgan before coming over to here and led on one of the leading autism at work programs. So he's going to be able to give a real great insight into some of those skills profiles and how they can be used within businesses to create great productivity and great business benefits. So Lee, I'll bring you in at this point.
Yeah, so as Emma's just said, my background is leading one of the globe's outstanding autism at work programs that became Neurodiverse at Work program, like many of the larger companies that founded the Autism at Work Roundtable have done. In fact, that is now renamed the Neurodiversity Roundtable, I believe. So in working with lots of companies and talking to them about the individuals that they brought in, I started to ask the question, so tell me about the candidate. What is it that really started to make them stand out to you? And there's a great piece that you can see on the right of this slide there that was done out of the University of Leeds that we use. And if you actually look at the profile and you take away from here that this is around, neurodivergent candidates, everything that you see on there is what you're looking for in a really outstanding candidate. And when we bring back into the fact that they are neurodivergent and potentially, autistic, this is a great profile of autistic individuals. We started to see some really key strengths that employers really honed in on, particularly attention to detail. Everybody hates rework. Everybody hates getting things wrong, particularly in a company. You want your employees to get things right. I worked for a financial company previously, moving trillions of dollars around the globe every day. You want to make sure that goes once, because if you get something wrong, that could mean a whole company not getting their workforce paid, etc. So there was the unique attention to detail, the actual integrity, that honesty, that loyalty, that commitment. And that boils down to, again, when we start talking about commercially, why would you want to do any kind of program? If you start looking at the output that we saw, which was the right first time statistics of the individuals that came through the program, the retention rates. So you hire somebody, it tends to be one of the most expensive things that a company does. It's either their employees or their buildings are the two most expensive elements. So when you hire and you train, you then want them to stay. You don't want to hire them, train them, and then watch them walk out the door and go to another company. So what we found is neurodivergent individuals are far more likely to stay. The retention rates were well up into the 90%. I think the average is normally in mid-70s. But then the surprising side that you will see is that creativity. And Emma just spoke about, her creativity and her every day she will come to me with a different idea. And that is great. And I have a great team around me. I am neurodiverse myself. I'm diagnosed autistic, so I love structure. So that's why Emma and myself work well together. She'll come with the great ideas, and I'll put some structure around it. And if I don't, I'll put her over to one of the team members who will put some structure around it, particularly with marketing, etc. You have no idea where this started. This was going to be all singing, all dancing, and we narrowed it down and got the focus down to get it to fit within the hour. So again, great strengths that come and that we see and that companies are really tapping into. And from a commercial element, this is why neurodiversity at work programs are really taking off across the globe. The likes of JP Morgan, EY, Ford Motor Company, SAP, and Microsoft founded the Autism at Work Roundtable to tap into such strengths. That roundtable, as I said, is now Neurodiversity at Work and has now got 40, 50 big members and support small companies as well. So it's growing and growing and growing. So again, that's another area. If you're on here from a company and you want to learn more, look that up. Microsoft Neurodiversity at Work program, and you will see all the great work that lots of companies are doing there.
We can also share that, can't we, Lee, after this? So we'll share the links to see that. And I think what Lee mentioned there, I think, when you think about teams, having a neurodivergent team is the only way I think you can get really great products, services that kind of challenge the norm and provide in whatever form your business does, provide actual innovative solutions. So I was talking to one of my colleagues from another company who set up, in fact, we've got a Q&A out there. So it's with David from NutPods, and we were chatting. And to me, having a neurodivergent team is just a really well-oiled team. So you wouldn't necessarily, we don't want everybody to have the same skill set, because how would it ever run? We don't think of a car, a car's engine runs perfectly because every single part of that engine does a different piece of the puzzle, and that's what makes things run smoothly. So being able to bring so much neurodivergence into your teams will create a really well-run, effective team.
And being extremely honest, as the World Health Organization put out there that 20% of the population have a neurodivergent condition, you already have 20% of your workforce. Yeah. Yet we all know, with self-disclosure, etc., when we look at disability rates, etc., that's around 2%. A lot of the major companies out there sit anywhere between 2 and 6% of self-disclosed individuals stepping forward. And some of that is what we're going to touch on in a while, which is around, you can get that number up by culture, but you already have 20% of your workforce that will have one of the conditions that we've spoken about, but are not disclosing to you. So therefore, you're not getting the best out of that employee because that employee doesn't feel supported.
Absolutely. And, touching on disclosure there a little further, what lots of people will ask, and what we've kind of the conversations we've had with businesses before is, but we haven't got a disclosure, so what can we do? And what we'll touch upon before we finish today is there's a lots of things that you can do, that you don't have to rely on disclosure, because there's so many practical strategies that you can just put in place, or processes you can put in place for your business that doesn't necessarily need people to disclose, because once you work in a certain way, you're just creating more accessibility for everybody. So we're just going to go on to the next slide. So basically, from these kind of our discussion so far, we know there's huge vacancies, there's massive unemployment rate, and there's great skill sets. So why aren't businesses tapping into this? Why is it still there's all these vacancies and unemployment rate? We can use those things together. And what we think is happening, based on the conversations that we have, is businesses want to make hires, but are reticent to kind of get going on making those hires because they don't feel they have the infrastructure or knowledge within their business to support it effectively. So really, we've got businesses that are wanting to do the top-down approach to creating culture change, when actually they also need to be looking kind of a bottom-up approach. So when we talk about top-down approaches, we're looking at kind of from the top, basically looking at businesses want to have a clear strategy in place. They want to then have that clear knowledge and training in place, and then they're ready to do hires. Benefits of doing a top-down approach is, you've got consistency. You know that if you've got your strategy in place and you've done the training, everyone's getting the same message, everyone has the same knowledge base, and everyone has the same processes to follow. And I think it also gives your hiring managers some increased confidence that you'll be able to ensure that the hires succeed in their roles because you've got all of the infrastructure already in place. But doing that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of investment. It takes and having to take that time is you're missing out on being able to fill those vacancies with that neurodivergent talent. And also there's a slight risk to your reputation, because what we will find is people will come to us, especially neurodivergent employees within your businesses, that will say, look, we know there's all this talk going on about a strategic point of view, and our strategy for this year is to make sure we are fully accessible to neurodivergent employers, but on the ground we're not seeing it happen yet. So that time delay between taking your strategy and implementing it could backfire for you as your business. So then when we look at your bottom up process, that's like kind of going, look, let's just get on with the hiring, and we know then we're filling the roles and we're getting the talent in, and then we'll work as and when we need to increase the training and the knowledge. The benefits of doing that bottom up approach is you're filling vacancies, there's immediate progress, and you're identifying your internal champions, because the people that are going to be ready to do it are the people that already see the benefits, that want to create that change in the team. So you're able to kind of really tap into that knowledge on the ground that you have. Some of the difficulties with your bottom-up approach, though, is it can be inconsistent. Sometimes it might feel like there's discrimination, because you might have one team that's making great hires and adapting the interview process, adapting the onboarding process, and doing everything that they can to make it accessible. But another hiring manager that doesn't necessarily have that background knowledge, that lived experience, that personal connection to neurodiversity, might not be doing those things. So you're kind of discriminating it then at the bottom level, and we'll find that work often happens in silos. So there's not that joined up approach, and there's not that consistency. So based on that, I'm just going to put another poll up and put it out to you guys of what do you think is best as a business if you want to create that culture change. So here we go. So what do you think is best? Do you think a top-down approach is the best answer, bottom-up, or combined? Brilliant. Oh, you're all so good. Right answers all the way here, I think. So what we think, and I think the majority of people have said this, is we think a combined approach. It has to work really holistically to create the culture change. And I think you have to have a top-down approach, because you have to have the buy-in, you have to have that executive sponsorship, and you have to have a strategy to go alongside it. But there's no reason you need to get all of that in place before you start hiring. So you need to be underpinning all your activity with support from training providers, support from internal employees, support from managers, including your current employees in the process, and focusing on all areas. And one of the things I would say try not to do is don't discuss strategy without taking action at the same time, because that's when you kind of have that reputational risk. Don't try to do it alone. Do reach out to people, and don't worry too much. Everything's a learning process. It's okay to get things wrong. What needs to happen when things are like, I get things wrong all the time, that's part of life, but it's about then learning from when we get things wrong, and showing actions to rectifying it the next time. Don't be so worried about doing something the wrong way that you then don't do anything at all. So Lee, I'd love to bring you back in now, so you can give some examples for, how you have seen businesses creating that culture change from a support and strategy type point of view.
Yeah, again, when we go back to that top down, bottom up, they really do have to work hand in hand to be successful. All of the larger companies and some of the smaller companies out there that I've worked with and seen have done this, and it has to come from. You do have to have that come from above. So you do need that executive sponsorship and buy-in. And when we talk about the training as well across the organization, the way that I always started was with that training of that executive team, the senior managers. You bring them, you need to get buy-in. We all know that you need buy-in from leadership. But again, one of the biggest growths at the moment is diversity, equity, and inclusion roles that we see across all companies. Companies are really starting to understand that they need to have a representation of the community that they're serving. And so are really trying to do that. Now, the diversity piece is the numbers piece. We can all hire individuals to meet a quota. The big piece that we're talking about here is the inclusive piece. How inclusive do your staff feel? And therefore, how good is your culture? And when we start working with individuals, and when any program that I've sort of built, it's around starting to change that culture. So you do start to do that top down approach a little bit. So you starting to build the strategy, but you're doing the strategy in consultation with your employee resource groups or business resource groups, however you call that, because you're tapping into the community within your organization already, asking what things need to change for them, and equally what do they see as needs to change for them to feel inclusive. And you start to build out your strategy, and we start to talk about training's key, but the employee resource groups are also key, because they start to tend to do a lot of chats, bring people in like myself and other speakers to talk across the organization, all supporting that changing culture, reviewing processes, looking at your processes, universal design. So again, tapping into those groups. Executive sponsors are saying, hey, we want to change our processes. So you're already taking action. You're showing that you're making steps forward by utilizing your internal staff. So you're making changes to your culture internally. And then similarly, you're starting to identify roles, managers, key areas that you would like to start to make change. Because again, if you're a large company or a small company, you're not trying to boil the ocean overnight. You need to make incremental steps and changes. So when it comes to hiring, do the same. Start to identify areas where you've already started and embedded the training, where there may be a number of your employee resource groups sat, and then start to look at and partner with people to bring in the talent, because then you're starting to show again that you're making further progress. So many companies talk a good game. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this change. And then 2 years later, I'm engaging with them, and they're still talking about the change, because they think if they talk about it, that's them taking action. And it's not. But we've got that on the right-hand side of this slide there that you can see. Keep talking. That means as you're doing this, keep talking about your success stories, keep reviewing your strategy, keep the engagement up with the employee resource groups, keep making sure that you're engaging with the community outside. Things like that are also great to set up with inside the business to really make sure that culture and change and support happens is buddy systems, not just for the individuals, but for managers. Make sure there is a place for managers to go and ask questions, because again, they don't want to get things wrong, and sometimes being left on their own is where we start to see things fall down, or they reach out to HR, and HR don't always have all the answers to this. Again, you're talking about potentially 600 diagnosable neurodivergent conditions. We were having a conversation before, what makes up that 600? Again, this is why we talk about 600, because it's ever changing. You can talk to one set of doctors, and again, things change. But what we talk about here is these are roles where you're tapping into strengths. So that's why we talk about autism, ADHD, all of those kind of things. What are the strengths that those bring? And the other side of this is, what support do you need to bring to some other neurodivergent conditions that you have within your company? So to have that cultural change, it's around executive buy-in, ensuring that you're training and being able to positive training. What are the strengths of individuals? How do you help support and bring the best out of all of your talent? That's the kind of training that you want to bring. Engaging with your employees, keep bringing in talent and engaging externally to find talent. 1.3 million unemployed. If you keep going to the same communities, you're going to keep struggling to find the talent. What us and other people are able to do is find you talent that is not in that mainstream. Or if they are, they struggle to get through things like your artificial intelligence sifting of CVs or resumes, or struggle to get through that first conversation because introducing themselves to people is that difficult first conversation. So we say, don't do it alone. Training and consulting, executive sponsorship, bringing all of your employees along for the journey. And that is basically what those 6 founder members founded their whole programs on. Top down, bottom up, included everybody, but made progress every day by doing it all in conjunction. They didn't just say, hey, we're doing this and we're going to train and then we're going to stop. But they recognized that change has to start within. So they started that change internally, but very quickly moved into recruiting to ensure that it was a holistic program. And again, working with companies like us, we're there to help you make that cultural change. So actually that part of what we do, that consultative part, in 5-10 years time, you don't need, because it just becomes BAU. You hire talent because they're talented individuals, no matter what their background. The bit that you may still need support with is, where do I find that talent? That's the other big question we always get. Where do we find the talent? And again, people like us, Rangam, we're very good. We're introduced into the UK. We're trying to bring that single source of talent. We are, with our source-abled system, we're slowly working with all third-party support networks, not-for-profits, and bringing together all of the talent into one place to help them have a better chance of finding roles. That was my biggest challenge at my previous company, was I want to hire people, but where do I find the talent?
Perfect. And that's really great, Lee, because that brings me quite nicely into, if you could, so we talked about like you struggling in your last place to find the talent. So, you know, you worked with other organizations to support you to access kind of those talented individuals. But what types of things would you suggest is useful for businesses to look at to create that accessibility, to make sure they're getting the talents coming through?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies over the last couple of years have done a lot of work around gender equality. So when they've looked at when they're putting out their job specs, they've been looking at it from a gender diversity point of view and making those changes. This is around looking at, one, when you're putting out the job specification, ensuring that it obviously is out there for everybody. Thinking about the language, thinking about the strengths that you're looking for and that are needed for the role. And you know, I've seen some that say I need 20 or 30 things for the individual to go onto the role. You know, think about what is really important to the role and ensure that you're describing that in the correct way. You know, this high level must be a great communicator means nothing. What do you actually mean? Be very specific in those job specs. Look at your interview process. Make sure it is accessible for all. You know, we still ask questions in the same way. So can you tell me a time that you worked as part of a team? I'm autistic. The correct answer to that is yes. I can tell you a time, but I'm going to stop at yes, because you're not training managers to actually think about how they ask the question. It's about changing your process, but universal design, change it for everybody. We're not saying or advocating that you make the change just for a certain group. It's around, is my interview process accessible to all? think about reasonable adjustments. What kind of reasonable adjustments can you make in the process? Some of the things around what we've looked at, and I'm going to pick up on technology. When you ask somebody at an interview, can you tell me about your technology background, or tell me about, can you do this? I can tell you I can do anything, but the proof is in the pudding. So that's why a lot of people do more on the job or give more situation based. If you're going to hire a coder, set them a coding task.
Yeah.
These kind of things that you can do, because again, you need to look beyond in some of these resumes the fact that these individuals may not have had a great deal of work experience. One of the best hires that we ever made as an organization was an individual who for 5 years had worked as a janitor in a supermarket. He was actually brought in as a senior manager within a technology role because his passion, what he did in his spare time, was technology. He loved it. He could code like nobody else, but he'd never got through that social element of the interview process. His resume never got through artificial intelligence because he didn't have the experience. And then when you're onboarding and training, make sure they're supported and the manager's supported. Think about that end-to-end process. But again, universal design, is everybody supported?
Perfect. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that kind of thinking that lots of neurodivergent people will have non-traditional qualifications and an education route, but that doesn't necessarily mean people don't have the skills. So that janitor that you mentioned there, like his skill set is probably more current than people that have gone through their qualifications, because he's continuously doing it in his spare time, and that's his passion and his love. So just because someone doesn't have that stamp of approval that they've gone through a course and they've learned everything and they've passed, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't have the skills for the job. One of the other things I think I just want to touch on there as well with the interview process is, don't necessarily expect people, I'm sure everyone on this call already knows this, so I don't want to teach everyone to suck eggs, but don't necessarily expect that people will give the expected body language in an interview. And I don't think that we talk about that a lot with autistic candidates, but I think that's probably across the board for all neurodivergent candidates. So we talk a lot with autistic people that it's more about eye contact and the difficulties with those types of things with your kind of expected body language. But for the neurodivergent condition, so for example, for me with ADHD, lots of the times in meetings or doing things like this, I will have to be doodling and doing other things to be able to really process all of that information. But I know by doing that, it might look like I'm not listening, I'm not, taking all of the information in. But if I have to kind of make sure I am looking, that's often when I'm not processing the information, because I'm not freeing up my mind by doing other things to be able to allow that information to come in. So I think across the board, make sure that you've made everything as accessible as it can be, but also that you think about what your expectations are going into that interview situation or that onboarding situation or that meeting that you're having with your neurodivergent employees, and just think to yourself, okay, this wasn't necessarily what I would have expected to be seeing from one of my employees or one of my candidates, but why might they be displaying this? And proof is in the pudding, essentially. Like, if someone then goes away and does the job well and does do their actions well, then it doesn't necessarily matter that kind of their body language is an unexpected or not within what society demands for people to display. So I think we've come to the end of our presentation. Now, this is the first time we've used this platform, so I'm really struggling that I can't see you all or see anybody's faces. But if anyone does have a question, they could say in the chat, and that you can either ask a question in the chat function, or you could say, I'd like to ask a question, and I can invite you to stage, and you can actually ask it by talking to us. So over to you guys. Anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Lee or myself?
And while they're coming in, remember this: when we're talking about talent, we also have talent that do have the experience. These are individuals that may have got diagnosis later in life, or have hidden away for such a long time and now find it's right that they would like to change, like the Great Resignation, they would like to change their career, but it's a big struggle to make the change. So that there is talent that has gone through university, got degrees, PhDs, all of that kind of thing. It's a full range, as you would expect, of talent. And on the interview side, companies, think about training your managers. So many companies I've worked with that just assume because you're a manager that you can actually interview people. It's just, they think it's a given. But actually interviewing and you know, really getting the most out of it, that 30 minutes, 60 minutes you have with a candidate is an actual skill, and needs to be trained. So make sure that you're investing in your managers as well in that process.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee. So just come to the end. So you might be able to see on your screens there's a contact us button there. If people do want us to get in touch with us after today to discuss in more detail how we might be able to work with you, or have any additional questions that you might want to ask that's more tailored to your business, then do click on that button. We'll be able to track that and get in touch with you after today. But what I'd like to say is thank you all. Thank you, Lee, for sharing kind of your input and your personal experiences and your professional experiences of delivering these types of programs. Thanks everybody for joining us. And hopefully it's sunny here. So hopefully it's sunny where you all are and everyone gets a chance to have a fabulous day. But thanks all, and have a great day.